Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the jungle tier list for patch 7.6. So in this patch specifically, there's not too many champions that are super OP in the jungle, at least in my opinion. So there's not too many champions in the tier 1 for this patch. There's a lot more champions that are in like tier 1.5 and they're in tier 2, because I think the jungle's actually pretty balanced now with champions like Rengar and Kha'Zix getting nerfed. There's only really like one or two junglers right now that are like super OP. But with that being said guys, let's get started. So starting it off in the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Graves, and this one should really be no surprise here. Graves is probably the best jungler that you can pick in this patch if you can play the champion well. So Graves, he's just got a really good kit for jungle. He doesn't really have too many weaknesses in his kit other than the fact that he doesn't provide hard crowd control, but Graves just has so many strengths that it really outweighs that one little weakness that he has in his kit of not having that hard CC ability. He can do a ton of burst damage while also being able to do consistent damage, so you can always be useful with this champion in a team fight. For example, if you're playing someone like a Kha'Zix or a Rengar, when you jump in, you kind of just have to like burst someone down or else you're going to be pretty useless. But with Graves, you have the potential to one-shot someone with your Q ult combo, but you also have the potential to deal a ton of consistent damage in team fights with your auto attacks, which just makes him a really good pick overall. And then he also does have great mobility in his kit, which allows him to have really good carry potential, and it allows him to pretty much 1v5 if you get ahead with Graves. Whenever you are auto attacking with him, the cooldown on your E does get reduced, which just allows him to stay super mobile in team fights, dodge skill shots, and get a load of damage off. Now, as for when you should not pick Graves in this patch, I think that if he's not banned and he's open, that you should pick him if you are a good Graves player. Now, statistically, he doesn't do very well against Ivern and Shako, but I really wouldn't pay too much attention to those stats because I think he's actually a pretty good pick against Ivern and against Shako too. It just does depend on how good of a Graves player you are. If you're a good Graves player, then you should be able to bully Ivern around in the early game, take advantage of your strong early game and just get super far ahead of him. And then for Shako, you shouldn't really have too much of a problem against him. If he does try to invade you, then you can just use your dash to get away, and you can just use your flash if you need to, and you will outscale a Shako really hard once it does reach the mid to late game. Next up in the tier 1 here is going to be Shako, and Shako in this patch is performing really well with this hybrid build that a lot of people are building on him. So what most players are going now on Shako is they're not going for like a full damage build of going for like full lethality or full AP. What most people are going is like this build of Trinity Force and Titanic Hydra and like a Sunfire Cape and just getting super tanky, but you're also still able to do a lot of damage with that build. I've seen so many Shako players just have like a Trinity Force and have a Titanic Hydra, and they can still one-shot a squishy target. After they finish those two items, they just go tank, and they're still super useful. They don't die as fast in team fights, but they still do have the potential to one-shot. Shako's early game is one of the best for any jungler as well, which just allows him to get a really good snowball going, especially if he is up against a little bit of a weaker early game jungler. If he is up against a jungler that doesn't do well for the first few levels, he can just invade them, he can steal their camps, he can get a kill on them if he's lucky enough, or if he does find them out on low HP, and he can also just get his lane super far ahead. You take the ignite on Shako, so when you're ganking a lane, if they are like below half HP and they're pretty low, then you should be able to basically get a guaranteed kill with like an auto attack with your E and with that ignite. And your gank paths with Shako are also very unique. Once you do get a few points into your Q, it's just so hard to play against him because he can just lane gank whenever he wants to. His Q, once you get a few points into it, I think it lasts at least like 4 or 5 seconds, so it's just so hard to play against a good Shako player. And I think that if you do put the time into this champion, he's one of the best junglers that you can play right now. Now for when you should not pick Shako, he is a tier 1 champion right now, so there really isn't too many situations as to when you should not pick the champion. I think that if you're a good Shako player, if you can play him really well, then you should just be picking him every game and you shouldn't really worry too much about like the enemy team comp. But if you are like last pick on your team and your team is lacking some sort of team fight or some sort of crowd control, then in that situation I wouldn't pick him. But if you're like first or second pick and the enemy team has not banned Shako, I would pick him up for sure. And then to round out the tier 1 champions for this patch is going to be Ivern. So Ivern right now, there's many reasons to why he's a strong jungle pick. Number 1, his item path is one of the most cost efficient item paths for any jungler. Picking up the Athenes and then after that building either like a locket or redemption, it only takes him around 16 to 20 minutes to get those items. And once you have those items on Ivern, it just gives him such a big power spike. His team fighting ability once he gets those 2 items is really good. The amount of shielding that he's going to be able to put out in those team fights with his E combined with the Athenes as well as like the redemption or locket is just not going to allow his team to die. And as long as his team doesn't fall super far behind in the early game, then it should be pretty easy for you to win mid-game team fights as Ivern and just snowball the game from there. He can also do a really good job against the meta junglers. As long as he doesn't fall behind like super far in the early game, then he can do great against champions like Rengar or Kha'Zix or Hecarim. Any champion that wants to dive in on your back line, Ivern can do great against, because if those champions, if they dive in on your AD carry and they don't end up one-shotting your AD carry, then you're just going to be able to burst them down and they're going to be pretty useless. And with Ivern, with the shield from your E, with the extra healing from the Athenes, and then as well as the extra healing from either redemption or the shield from locket, your teammates are really just not gonna die. And it's super hard unless like the Kha'Zix or Rengar gets very far ahead in the early game. You're gonna do a really good job against them and stopping them from doing what they want to do. And then another great strength to Ivern is his ability to set the enemy jungler behind. Now what I would look to do when you're playing the champion is try to get a ward down on the enemy jungler's buff, or just know where the enemy jungler is starting. By doing this, it will allow you to 3-buff the enemy jungler a lot of the time, because you can start the buff opposite to where they're starting. For example, if the enemy jungler is starting on their blue buff, then you can start on your blue buff. You can go over, invade their red buff, and if they don't know you're invading their red buff, then they're just gonna walk over there, they're gonna see that their red buff is gone, and you're gonna be able to just set them pretty far behind in the early game. Getting a buff or getting the buff as a jungler is super important for like XP in the early game. So by doing that and by getting 3 buffs as Ivern, it's just gonna make your early game a lot stronger, and you're gonna set behind the enemy jungler quite a bit. Now for when you should not pick Ivern right now, he actually doesn't have a champion, or there's not a single champion in the game that's actually winning against him. So if you're a good Ivern player right now, then I wouldn't really worry too much about getting counter picked. As you can see here, he's got like a 58% win rate against Kha'Zix and Hecarim, a 61% win rate against Nidalee right now. That's honestly pretty disgusting, like how high of a win rate he has against those champions. So as long as you can play well as Ivern, as long as you have knowledge on the champion, you can do really well with him in this patch. So moving over to the tier 1.5 champions now for this patch, these are going to be Kha'Zix, Rengar, Warwick, and Nunu. So Kha'Zix and Rengar, they're still great carry jungler picks. They're not as OP as they were in previous patches, which is why they're tier 1.5 right now. But I think that you can still take over a game with either one of these champions, which is why they're still very high up in the tier list. And then as for Nunu right now, I think he's definitely very underrated. He's basically like an Ivern 2.0. I think that Ivern is still like a little bit stronger than him, but he does definitely fit the same role that Ivern does. He's kind of more like of a supportive jungler who can just do a really good job at setting the enemy jungler behind in the early game. The reason to why Nunu is a lot stronger now though is because of the introduction of Stoneborn Pact. In previous patches, Nunu just never never had a Keystone Mastery that worked well with him at all. I'm pretty sure the few Nunu players that were actually playing him, they would go like Grasp on Nunu, and that mastery for the most part is a laning mastery. You don't see junglers take that mastery, so the fact that Nunu jungle was taking that just goes to show you like he just did not have a keystone that worked well with him at all. And with Stoneborn, you can proc it super easy with your E and your ultimate and just allow your team to heal quite a bit in team fights. So when you are playing Nunu, as long as you can invade well in the early game, as long as you can set the enemy jungler behind, then you're going to be very successful on him in this patch. And then Warwick is also really good right now too. He's probably one of the best skirmishing junglers in the game. If you get into a 2v2 scenario early game against a Warwick and he's got his E up, then you're not really gonna win that against him. He has the fear from his E. He also gets like 35% damage reduction from his E once it's up, and he also has the sustain from his Q. So it's really hard to beat Warwick in skirmishes, and once he is in like a 2v2 scenario, if he does end up like counter ganking you top lane, then you're gonna pretty much lose that every single time. His ultimate is just such a great tool as well. It's pretty much a free kill at level 6. You also can get super tanky with this champion and still deal a lot of damage. He's probably one of the best bruiser junglers that you can pick right now. You only really need like one damage item on him, being like a Titanic Hydra. You go full tank after that and you can still be a really good damage threat in team fights. And then for the tier 2 champions in this patch, these are most of the other champions in the game. So I think that the jungle is pretty balanced right now, like I said at the start of the video. So the champions in the tier 2 right now are basically all of the viable junglers and the junglers that you can pick and have good success with if you have good knowledge on them. So I'm just gonna put them all up on screen here because there's a lot of junglers in the tier 2 for this patch. And then I'm not going to be doing like a tier 3 for this patch, because if the champion was not either in like the tier 1, 1.5 or tier 2, then that does mean that I don't really think they're really worth picking over a different champion on this list. But with that being said, guys, if you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.